Good morning, everybody. How are you all? Awesome. All right, good. My name is Matt. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of Deep Green, which is why I'm dressed like this. Mark had this idea last week, and I thought, I'm not going to swear, but I was like, are you essing me? Are we really going to do this? And then on Sunday afternoon, this picture arrived. I was running, and this picture arrived on WhatsApp of him dressed up. And then his LinkedIn changed. And then he said, it's only funny if we all do it. Nice look, Simon. All right, we're going to have some fun this morning. Thank you so much for coming. It starts where you are. Let's do this. Welcome. Mark will do a proper welcome. I'm going to try not to fall off this stage. As well as CMO of Deep Green, I'm also a breathwork instructor. How many people know what a breathwork instructor is or have heard of breathwork? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I can make the rest up. I've always wanted to be a Hoff, not David Hasselhoff, but Wim Hof. How many people have heard of Wim Hof, the Iceman? All right, we'll go with this. I would like you to close your eyes. I'm feeling relatively nervous. This has only taken 9 weeks to pull off with an amazing team, but let's close our eyes or just go soft focus if that's your thing. All right, I'm going to try not to send you to sleep. I'm not a hypnotist. And just begin to observe your breath. You've all had commutes to get here. I've had a real coffee. I don't even drink caffeine. Just begin to pay attention to your breathing. See if you can feel it in the body. Maybe it's in and around your nostrils. Maybe it's in your chest. If you've been trained by me, maybe you can feel it down towards your abdominal muscles, down towards your diaphragm. Slow the breath down now. So begin to think about inhaling nice and slowly and exhaling nice and slowly, all through the nose. Allow yourself to relax. And in this gentle space you're creating for yourself, I'd like you to think about a memory of swimming. Maybe it's in a swimming pool. Maybe it's a childhood memory, that cold water, those clinically cleaned changing rooms with their strange little cubicles. Not wanting to get in and then never wanting to get out. And most of us, if you're my age, can probably remember the vending machines. A packet of salt and vinegar crisps, or some lukewarm soup out of a vending machine. These special moments, and maybe you might recount sharing similar moments if you have children with your own children, taking them to a public pool, sharing time with them without a mobile phone. It's the only place I can take my daughters where they're not connected to some app I don't understand. Chuck them in water, and then they just incessantly swim away. You can never get the buggers out. Think about your own memory of swimming and just breathe that in recollection. And when you're ready, open your eyes. Lost half the audience to a moment of sleep, but welcome. Just a little bit of a thought about our memories of swimming. So for me, you might remember, some of you are old enough to remember this character on the left-hand side. As a child, there was Hong Kong Phooey. Now, this is not a time of the internet, right? This is a time where there were only 3 channels and they weren't in color. So I didn't even recognize this when I downloaded it. I was like, who's the colorful character? Because I had a black and white television. And Hong Kong Phooey was sort of social capital. If you watched it on a Thursday afternoon at 5:30, you would talk about it for a week afterwards, right? Hong Kong Phooey, super cool character. But my parents used to drag me away from them in the middle of Hong Kong Phooey to take me to Harrogate swimming pool and chuck me in so I could do those 10-meter lengths diving for bricks dressed in pajamas. some of you might have a similarly sort of visceral thought. And I wasn't concerned with the swimming. I was sort of like disappointed about missing Hong Kong Phooey. That's my memory of childhood of swimming. We'll talk a lot about memories. It is my great pleasure to introduce you to a great friend. About 9 months ago, Mark said, will you quickly brand Deep Green for me? We're about to go on the BBC. And some of you will have seen this as we described and talked about the launch of the Exmouth data center. I branded it and thought I'd never hear from him again, wishing right now that I never heard from him again. And then he contacted me in the summer and sort of said, it would be great if you could come and join us. We're on a mission. So it is my pleasure to introduce you to CEO and founder of Deep Green, Mark Bjornsgaard.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you. Wow. Thank you so much for coming. It's really lovely to see everyone here. I know how hard it is to break a morning routine and get yourself somewhere different for the morning. And a lot of you in the room are already supporters and friends. We have customers, so we've got Mark and Tom, who have been incredibly generous with their time, their enthusiasm, their interest. Mark was one of the very first people to without kind of caveat, put his hand up and said, yeah, I'm in, which is amazing. And Tom's going to show some film later, that's been rendered on the Deep Green, in a Deep Green data center. We've got Swim England here, we've got Phil, and we've also got our fantastic investors in the room. And Octopus, the only person who was quicker on the draw on the 14th of March was Bilal. And I checked on our CRM, and I think it's something like 11:50 that you completed the application, the contact form on Deep Green. And that day is indelibly etched in my memory. With somebody with somewhat of an anxiety disorder, we thought I was going to go down and do a bit of local radio, and then by 8 o'clock in the morning, we're doing live radio on the Today programme and then live TV. And then by the end of the day, I was like, this is the 18th one, it's no problem. So thank you all for being here. And we hope you're as excited as we are about this. This is a mission. It is a movement. It is a very different and brave thing that we're doing. And to frame it and to anchor ourselves in the human side of what we're doing, we've made a little movie.
For me and my two brothers, it was really quality time with Dad. And obviously in the early 70s, you didn't really get that because dads were dads and kids were seen and not heard, so to speak. So for us, it was real quality family time. The ritual of having been given some money to go to the vending machines and having a cup of soup and a bar of chocolate. The whole thing was an experience.
don't think there's a data center, any other data center company in the world could make a video like that. And it is a journey we're on. And my own recollections of pools is somewhat linked to my entrepreneurial journey. When we moved to London more than 25 years ago now, we thought we'd start to exercise, and I'd swum a little bit as a kid. And so Rachel and I, one day we got our swimming costumes on early in the morning, put our tracksuit bottoms on, and shuffled to Latchmere Leisure Centre. And Latchmere Leisure Centre's in Clapham. And I now cycle past Latchmere, so the kind of gestalt is complete. And the very first day we arrived, there were these quite scary looking people in the fast lane. And I thought, as is my way, I thought, oh, I'll be all right, I'll jump in the fast lane. So I got in, pushed off, and then about 20 seconds later, I was having my toes tapped by the people in the lane. And when you get your toes tapped in swimming, that means, mate, you're just too slow, get in the slower lane. And so, but by the end of the lane, by the end of that length, Gary Malone, who I didn't know at the time, said, "Do you want to just join our posse?" And I was like, "Okay, yeah, that's great." And that was the beginning of a lifelong friendship. And Gary would and the two Davids were in the pool. One of them became a dentist. The other David designed kitchens. We didn't know each other. We were brought together by that very sort of mundane but critical interaction in a swimming pool. And Gary, when he first started to come, would come in a beaten up old Renault 5, and then about 6 months later, he was in this quite swish Merc. It was like, "Gary, what's going on?" He goes, "Yeah, my wife Jo, she's just started to make these lotions that people seem to like." It was like, "Okay." And then about 6 months later, he's got an even posher Merc, and he's saying, "Gary, what is going on?" He goes, "Yeah, well, we just taken a little shop off Sloane Square." And then Joe Malone, the brand, had been born before I'd met Gary. But I was at the time beginning a business that was located about 3 blocks from here. And he gave me the tipping point. It was this kind of this reciprocity. He was sort of he's that kind of person who sort of pays stuff forward. And in my kind of arrogance, I then sent that book to Guy Hands at EMI, and that was the sort of start of my first entrepreneurial journey. So pools they are visceral for us. They're places where memories are made, but they're also places that we're losing. So we've lost hundreds. We may well lose many, many more in the years ahead. And this notion of a local public swimming pool, it's almost unfathomable to think that won't be there. They are such an integral part of our lives and societies. They're like community centres, like libraries. They can't not be there. They're where we exercise, where we learn to stay safe around water. They're where we compete. They are critical infrastructure. They really are critical infrastructure in a very different way. So I think most people in the room know how the economics and the physics of what we do works. So the what is understood. So instead of building a big data center in the middle of nowhere and wasting all the heat that comes out of the computers, instead we build a smaller data center either in the fabric of the building or very, very close by. And at that point, we are a completely normal data center. So we're just offering co-location services, bare metal. If you want to run infrastructure as a service, we'll fill the data center as well as run it, or we'll just rent you some space. But of course, at that point, the heat that the computers are generating, instead of it being wasted, we're providing it for free to the local pool. But of course, it's not really free. It's not free heat, it's also free cooling. And that, in a way, is why we've somewhat disingenuously kind of announced it, that we're giving this free heat away. Actually, it's free cooling. And what I love about the business is how simple it is. What's extraordinary is that when you put computers in oil, it does look really weird when you're immersing this electric item in what looks like water. But when you do that, a convection current starts, and you don't, in most cases, you don't even need to pump it around. The physics is on your side from the start in this business. It wants it to work. And then all that happens is the oil just gets pushed through a closed loop into a heat exchanger. And that heat exchanger then pushes the heat into the pool. Beautifully simple, beautifully elegant. So that's the what. And by the way, if any of that, if we want to geek out, we love geeking out. So if anyone wants to kind of go deep on the physics, we love that. So please come and collar one of us afterwards. The question is how. Not do you just do one pool, but how do you do many, and how do you do that at scale? And so first off, to begin to understand that, we got to go back to what's actually going on in the data center industry. And there is this Cambrian explosion of the need for compute. If you talk to any hyperscaler with the microphones toned off, they'll tell you that to make all the great stuff that they want to do just in their cloud platforms now, they need 3 times the amount of data center capacity they've currently got, and they need to bring it online within 5 years. So if you think all of the hyperscalers that we know, which are already using between 1% and 3% of the world's electricity supply, we now need 5x that in 5 years' time to make the robots do all the great things they're going to do for us. It's just not going to happen. The scale of the problem is an order of magnitude greater than most people can get their heads around. So we had 30 years of building all the capacity we've currently got. We now need 5x, and in 10 years we need 10x. So in 10 years, you're looking at the data center industry, which we all need. We all desperately need it. We rely on it for all of our lives, but we need 10 times the amount that we've got currently. And this is what I love about this business. So you've got this explosion of the need for compute, which is all high. It generates lots of heat, and most data centers aren't actually very good at capturing that heat. They don't really want these workloads. So there's this perfect symbiosis where you've got thousands of pools with who many of whom are in desperate need of a subsidy. And then on the other hand, you've got a data center industry which is desperate need of all of this space and all of the need to expand, and has an existential problem about how to do that. So the logic, this beautiful logic just takes hold. It's like you've got the pools, public swimming pools can allow the data center industry to expand however much it likes. And the beauty of this is we want as much heat as you can possibly give us. The heat is required. But it gets better, because not only is there an explosion in demand, the data center industry doesn't really want this workload, but it's also cheaper to do. As once you break up a data center and you take it and you vent and you use the heat, your cooling costs drop by 20%. And then another magical thing happens, that once you've got a really small data center and you've got lots of land around it for solar and batteries, you then start to really mess with the economics of the whole business. As you can say, if you're buying a PPA, a power purchase agreement, so if you're buying a long-term power contract at a certain price, if you can run the data center off-grid for more than 30, 40, 50% of the time, your price goes down. So in all aspects, this is a notion that makes a complete sense. And of course, at the end of that, you've got the economics work, the context works, but then the ESG-ness of it works as well. So we're building the fabric of buildings, so we're using less carbon. We're cooling less, so we're using less electricity, so using less carbon. We're not building on brownfield. We're building on brownfield sites, so we're not building on green or anywhere green. We're not taking up any new land. And of course, then you have all of the social benefit. These are some crazy stats. So billions in value to us as a society. I'm always somewhat, it always sort of makes me somewhat nervous to quantify such emotional, important stuff in very commercial terms. But it is billions in value. And actually, a lot of the pools that we've actually lost in deprived areas as well. So the loss of pools is something that's hurting poorer communities disproportionately. So that's the context. That's part of the how. The how do you save a public swimming pool with a data center? The movement can't start without you in the audience. We've framed the answer to the question of how do you save a swimming pool with a data center. It starts where you are. You are the people in the room. You are a pioneering group who, some of you, who have those clients with net zero targets. And individuals and businesses, they passionately want to hit those targets. And there is a lot of people, a lot of businesses, when they look at their overall carbon budget, they are shocked about how much their ICT is of that budget. But until us and until the scalable solution exists, there's no way to mitigate that. So it starts with you. It starts where you are. We can't start this movement. We can't get going without you. And there are already people doing it. So Exmouth is live. So Tom's going to show you a render of an ethically rendered movie. Mark, we were at a CIVO event earlier, actually last year, and some American clients who were using the Exmouth kit were there, and it just blew their minds that their workloads were heating a swimming pool on the other side of the world. We've got other partners who are putting their hands up for a pool in Sheffield. We've got Nigel at Northumbrian Water, who's put his hand up for Newcastle. We've got the Scottish government who want to start running Azure workloads, not coming out of Azure, but running Azure workloads in the cloud on HCI kit in our data centers. And we've got sister businesses with Octopus who are asking us for sites, because when all other things are equal, why wouldn't you bring us workloads, and why wouldn't you contribute to this social good? And even if you're not a swimmer, there will be someone in your organization, there'll be someone in your family, your kids will use a local pool, which is probably under threat. Your parents might be doing aqua aerobics, but there will be someone in your network for whom that pool is important. And that's where we want to start this. We want to start with people starting to understand that it's their computers generating the heat, and they can do something good with it. So if you're here. Hopefully you're in. You're a pioneering group. Where do we aim? Where does this movement aim? What's our ambition? Where do we start? Our ambition is to land a deep green unit in 1,500 swimming pools in 5 years. That's 300 megawatts of power. Quite a lot relative to the amount of co-location that's brought on every year in the UK, but a fraction of what we need in terms of that Cambrian explosion of AI. If we break that down, so if you break that down, you say year one, 25 pools, 5 megawatts. We take this beautiful, esoteric, beautiful symbiosis and we make it normal. If we were 300 years ago, if we were wasting the amount of heat that the data center industry currently wastes, that it could capture, it would be, that would seem weird to us. And now we need to make this concept, we need to normalize it. We need to establish a baseline. If everyone in this room brought us 200 kilowatts, we'd hit our mark. Seems like it's not impossible. Year 2, 75 pools, 20 megawatts. So the small group we've got in this room starts to grow. The message spreads. Companies with net zero targets start to take notice. The movement is starting to build. And if we grew this group just 3x, everyone brought us another 200 kilowatts, we'd hit our mark, we'd hit our target. Year 3, 200 pools, 60 megawatts. Now it's established, now there's momentum. You can claim that you were at the first launch event of Deep Green. Be like the Sex Pistols gig in 1975. There were about 100,000 people there, allegedly. By now, our solar and battery competitive advantage is kicking in. So by now, our pricing structure is looking amazing compared to the rest of the industry. Year 4, we're halfway there, 150 megawatts, 750 pools. Collectively, we're now contributing millions, tens of millions, directly back into our local economies. And now it's mainstream. And now if anyone, any business is thinking about co-location or bare metal, or they're thinking about ripping out their on-prem and going somewhere else, the only thing you'll do is use a deep green data center. Because why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? When all other variables are equal, of course you would use a deep green data center. And then the idea tips. So year 5, we hit a mark, 1,500 pools, 300 megawatts. But then what happens? As anyone who has worked with me knows, I'm not very good at celebrations, and I don't really like celebrating success before you've actually had success. But if we allow ourselves to dream for one moment, imagine in 5 years' time, 1,500 swimming pools in the UK being heated by data centers. Imagine if we could reverse the trend. Imagine if we could start to reopen pools. Imagine what that does collectively to us as a society and to the data center industry. At the moment, the data center industry is starting to be a pariah, a climate pariah. Where do you put all these workloads? It doesn't employ anyone in an area, and it's got this existential challenge of scale. This, as I said before, frames the data center industry as the cavalry coming over the horizon for the climate emergency. You can imagine a scenario in 10 to 15 years' time when data furnaces, deep green units, are priming all heat pumps. 17% of our country's home heating has to be electrified, and that doesn't make economic sense, but it does when you slave it with a deep green unit. So the data center industry can turn from being a climate pariah to being the heroes in this context. But then, finally, what does it do to us as a society? We all feel some sort of climate anxiety. You might be cycling to work. You might be eating less meat. You might have bought an EV. But this is a chance to put one more add to your climate credentials. Move workloads to deep green. And what I've always loved about this business from day one is that it's such an obvious, beautiful, symbiotic relationship where no one loses, that everyone kind of gets it. Once you frame the business like this, perhaps Deep Green then becomes an exemplar about how we then address the other challenges we have in public services and in the climate emergency. Can we galvanize ourselves to come up with more creative, more interesting, more plausible ways to start to solve some of the biggest challenges in our society? For some of you, I know swimming in a swimming pool might just be a memory. but none of us want to see pools close, and we can all be part of a movement. But it starts with you. It starts where you are. Thank you very much. So, without further ado, Loren, for the panel. Thank you very much. So Loren has been, again, a stalwart supporter for us. It was Loren who actually collared Microsoft a year ago when we were at a Tech UK event, I think, yeah. And I was like, oh, I'm not sure. He's like, no, come on, be fine. NetApp of, yeah, the same conversation. So being a massive supporter, so thank you. And the rest of the panel are going to come up now.
All right, welcome everyone. My name is Loren Long, and I live here outside of London, despite how I sound. So, I'm very happy to be here with my family. As the moderator, you never get to talk, you just have to ask the question, so I'm gonna take my turn first, make sure nobody cuts me off. I just wanna, sustainability is incredibly complicated, and I think a lot of the discussions that we have as an industry lose sight of all the different facets, and we focus on one thing and ignore something else that isn't getting better, or in fact is getting worse. And the holy grail of sustainability is a concept of absolute decoupling. How do we stop things from getting worse environmentally and socially, while at the same time having economic benefit? And it's incredibly hard. And I do want to say, I don't work for Deep Green. I'm great friends with them, but this isn't a paid advertisement. I would argue, and I'll go with any data center in the world, even the ones up in the Nordics, that this model is closer to that ideal of absolute decoupling and is more sustainable than any other data center model currently being operated. I don't care about your PUE, your WE, any of your UEs. The idea of bringing together, it's not E or SG, it's E and SG. How do we bring social good? How do we not hurt the environment? By taking advantage of brownfield sites. There's no more habitat and biodiversity loss. By bringing it into, the communities, and I'm gonna call out our friends in the power industry. They don't want to have to build transformers and transmission lines 40 miles outside of London for a massive multi-100 megawatt data center. There is power available within the envelopes in our communities that we take advantage of. And we don't need more construction. And then the most important part is the social. And when we talk to Swim England, it's going to become apparent this is more than just about swimming with our children and reliving memories or making new ones. There is more social benefit to just that. So at that, I'm going to turn it over, and I think each of us are going to have, that was my introduction, so I'm done. So why don't you go ahead?
Hi, so I'm Philip Brownlie from Swim England. Thank you very much for having me today. Pleased to be here and speak to you all on what is an incredibly important issue to us at Swim England. So we're the national governing body for swimming, diving, water polo and artistic swimming in England. We've got about 170,000 members across roughly 1,000 clubs up and down the country, touching sort of every community. But much wider than that, swimming is obviously one of the most popular recreational activities in the UK still. Over 10 million people swim every year. Hundreds of thousands of people swim regularly. And, Mark did a fantastic job of showcasing some of the benefits already. That sort of business of social good is kind of what we are fortunate enough at Swim England to be doing day in, day out. And we see that, through initiatives we're happy to be involved in, such as our water wellbeing work, which is trying to open up access to people with health conditions, whether it's our initiatives with the RNLI around Swim Safe, where we give free lessons to teach water safety and outdoor environments to children, whether it's the breakfast clubs we run for children who have not made the school swimming attainment levels. We're fortunate we see every day the sort of transformative power that swimming can have for people, and that relationship to the water that we all have in some way in our lives is absolutely crucial to us. But I guess, you know, what really brings me here today and why the whole discussion is framed, how do you save swimming pools, is because we have to acknowledge that there is a huge issue facing swimming and aquatics to do with facilities, and that's where the work that Deep Green are already doing in Exmouth is so has the potential to be so promising to see rolled out further. Something we'd be very keen to support further going forward. If you look at what's been happening with facilities for swimming over the last sort of 10, 15 years, it's been sort of almost like a perfect storm. We've got a real aging pool stocks. Over 1,200 pools in this country are 40 years old or more, which is coming to the end / well past their sort of shelf life, if you like. Quite often they'll be not as energy efficient as we would hope or like, and might not offer the sort of inclusive environments that we want to see and need to see going forward in our world. And that sort of manifests itself in a number of problems, because alongside the aging pool stock not being as energy efficient, all those kind of problems, we've seen local authorities are the largest owner and investor into sort of public leisure in the UK at the moment. And obviously local authority budgets in the last 10, 15 years have been horrendously squeezed. And we've seen that, you know, come through in all the figures showing that local authority spending on leisure has reduced substantially since 2010. And that has, you know, a real pressure point is being put on these pools up and down the country, which puts many of them at risk. And the third element, which is the symbiosis that was spoken about earlier, comes in, is these pools currently can be as much as 40% of a local authority's direct carbon emissions. So clearly there's huge scope. If they're going to meet their carbon aims, we're going to meet our national carbon aims, and we all want to see, you know, ESG playing a huge role going forward. That actually schemes like this that can solve problems for both sides of it can be absolutely transformative to move from where we are now to where we want to be in terms of a sustainable network of pools that are much more environmentally friendly and energy efficient. So that's it from me.
So I think we might have a little video to show.
Wrong order.
Sorry.
Counterintuitive, yeah. Keeping about. Hi, I'm Georgia Elliott Smith. I'm the founder and managing director of Element 4, and we are a sustainability consultancy working in industry on sustainability that really matters. So we pioneer an approach called disruptive sustainability, which is much more about purpose, it's about meaning, it's about lobbying, and it's about being a good corporate activist as well. So we help teams, people within industry, to really understand what matters, to focus their resources and focus their time and energy on the stuff that's going to actually make a positive change, instead of just virtue signaling, box ticking, all that standard reporting. Now, you know, in the market that we have, you have to do that standard reporting. That's just good housekeeping. But actually getting to the bottom of what really matters to your organization, getting to the bottom of why, what's your motivation for acting? And actually the motivation for acting could just be doing good business. You know, if we're all going to go bust, then it doesn't matter how much good we're going to do in the world. We're all going to be sitting on the sofa just watching Netflix. So, you know, we need to be out there in industry, doing good, making a difference. And that looks different for every organization. So really, what is it for you, and how do we galvanize your organization to make the biggest positive change and do good business at the same time? So that's a little bit about Element 4. My personal background. So I've been a sustainability professional for over 25 years. I was the first environment manager in the UK construction sector. Age 19, arrived on site, said, hey guys, why don't you just change everything that you're doing and we could save the planet? And you can kind of imagine how that went down. So I got a bit of a kicking early on and learned very quickly what meaningful change and winning hearts and minds, and actually, you know, what to do to make the rubber hit the road, you know, what that actually looked like. And I've been working in various different roles since then. I'm an engineer by background, but I'm now also a legal activist and campaigner. So I had a bit of an awakening in 2018. Having worked in the sector for over 20 years, I realized that nothing was changing, that we were doing all these tokenistic projects. We were talking about how we'd saved 10% of carbon emissions. We'd had zero waste to landfill, blah, blah, blah. But the planet was still on fire. we're still in a mental health crisis. All these things were just obviously true. And yet all of these corporate organizations were telling us how well they were doing. And so at that time was the time of the Extinction Rebellion uprising. I thought, that's not for me. They're all a bit, sweaty and weird and zealoty and all that stuff. I'm a professional. But it actually got to a point where I thought, why isn't it me? I'm struggling with this exact same grief and not knowing what to do as everybody else, even though I'm a professional. So I went in central London. I had my first vegan curry supplied by monks for free. It was just amazing. I met this incredible tribe of people and I became an out-and-out Extinction Rebellion activist. And I reformed my entire business on the basis of how can we take that activist spirit and how can we own it and use it within the corporate world in a way which meaningfully changes things and moves away from this tick-boxy intellectual exercise into something that matters. And so that's what I now do. And I think I'll leave it there because we're going to cover a lot more stuff in our conversation.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mark, CEO of CIVO. And first of all, I was going to say, I'm pleased I didn't get the memo about the lifeguard outfit. Luckily you're not wearing Speedos. Yeah, it's a little bit about myself. I've been involved in technology for about 25 years now, founded a number of different technology companies. Originally started in web hosting, a company called LCN.com, which was a domain name and hosting company, grew to become the 5th largest hosting company in the UK, had about 450,000 websites under management. I then got involved in building data centers, a company called Server-Choice. So I kind of know the deep green world from a different side, obviously not from the giving back, because in the early days there wasn't the opportunity of the technology to reuse that heat. Still own that company today, but back in 2008 when we built that data center, I was very passionate about making it as sustainable as possible. We're actually the first data center in the UK at the time to use what's called cold island closure. In the old days, you used to heat or cool the whole room, and now we actually enclose it and we cool the spaces that we need to cool. And we actually invested in free air cooling as well to use the outside air to help cool the data center, during the colder months. Even today, the actual, if anyone knows the PUE, the power usage effectiveness, is around about 1.3 for that data center that was built in 2008. And that still stands up pretty well today. And we're also talking to Deep Green about what we can do to make that data center even more efficient with solar power and things like that as well. But in my current in CIVO role as the founder, which we founded in 2017, it's a cloud computing company that is very similar to the likes of AWS and Google and Microsoft in many respects, but in a nutshell, cheaper, faster, and simpler. But we've always been on a mission of sustainability as well. And ever since meeting Mark, from the first meeting, we were absolutely sold on the idea of working in partnership and collaboration. And myself, I've got 2 young kids, 6 and 7. 6 and 9. I say. That would be pretty quick, wouldn't it? And it's really interesting, obviously, when you have young kids and you see things through their eyes and how well educated they are, even at the age they are, on the environmental impacts. And I was talking in Austin last week in Texas. We hold our own conference every year, and I was keynoting there. And when you look at the next generation, the Gen Zs, I think that the stat is 72% are actually extremely interested in environmental issues. And I think it's 42%, their biggest fear is climate change. So I think with my own kids, I think we deserve to leave the world in a better place for the next generation. So again, when we had a chance to work with Deep Green, it really struck a chord with me. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name's Tom Balkwill from Dirty Looks Post-Production. This is very much not my world. To start with, this room is far too bright. I usually sit in the dark, very much at the end of a production. And I've founded a little company 14 years ago, and we basically do color grading and mastering for feature films and episodic TV dramas and things like that. We have big computing needs, and we spend money on air conditioning and keeping it all working. And this has always been very interesting to me, you know, to do this better, to manage our resources better, and to try and do some good. And I met Mark last year, having taken interest in a parallel project, which wasn't this one, but it was to do with attaching a VFX render node to a hot water tank. And I just thought that's an amazing idea. And that, I think, was kind of at the seed of where he is now, or one of the many ones. But that kind of got me into the technology, and these guys have been so generous with their time and resources, and we've developed some, I think, UK first and possibly global first rendering in these fantastic immersion tanks in Exmouth. So it's been really exciting to be on that journey. Everyone I speak to in the industry, we're all geeks, you know, and everyone loves it. Everyone wants to know how they can get involved, and I'm just thrilled to be involved at this stage, and we'll probably talk more about it in a bit. But yeah, I just wanted to thank you guys for the journey, you know. Yeah, okay, so we've got a trailer for a film called Afgrunden, The Abyss, which is running on Netflix, came out on that platform a few weeks ago. It's we've got an office in Brussels as well, and we do a lot of remote work with Brussels, which is sort of ties in with co-location and dark fiber and all sorts of stuff that you guys know about. But yeah, we graded this in Brussels, and it's a disaster movie based on a true town in the north of Sweden where there's been too much raiding of the Earth's resources in a big mine underneath the town. And yeah, that's not good.
Round of applause for Tom. In what is a world first, and in broadcast, I think it's in Broadcast Magazine today. Well done, Tom. Over to you.
Great. So, Phil, I want to start with the pools, and Mark gave some stats. You talked about it, but I want to expand the discussion, because it's not simply about kids in pools, and I want you to go further to talk about the health implications. I mean, the secondary and tertiary effects, and because I think what it does is it brings into scope that it's not just about the pool. It's about all the other things in the community, for the elderly, for the indigent, etc.
That's exactly right. What we see, you know, every day is swimming is a fantastic. It's almost unique in terms of it's an activity that is ideal for people of all ages, from birth right up to people, you know, 100-year-old that still go up and down way faster than I could ever do, and everything in between. And what we see, you know, you have to look across society at aging population, ever-increasing pressures on NHS systems, obesity, you know, mental health issues. There's a whole panoply of health conditions that are all swimming to be a massive part of the solution to those problems and helping ease the pressure on the NHS. And we want to play a full role in that process. And you only have to look at the figures for participation, particularly amongst the older generations, and swimming is the second most popular, alongside like organised exercise classes, which are, again, not exclusively, but you would traditionally find happening at the same leisure centres that have got the pool in as well. So those centres are really, really crucial for, you know, the health and well-being of the nation. And they can, through reimagining their purpose and having ever closer links between the sort of swimming world and the health world, can play even bigger roles than they currently do. But to do that, they've got to be there. They've got to be there for people to be able to use them. What we see when pools do close or under threat, if I'm retired with access to my own car, maybe I can just drive to the next pool. It's not really the end of the world. But if I'm, you know, a single mum who's gets the bus to get their kid there for a swimming lesson, and that pool's no longer there, well, hang on, now it's 2 bus rides and I can't get there, and it just runs the risk of excluding more people from the activity we want, and particularly the groups that are already underrepresented. You know, we recognise in swimming we've got a load of work to do to make sure that we're more diverse and more representative as an activity for everyone to participate. Where we see closures happening or people not being able to access it, we're going to see those widening inequalities, which is the exact opposite direction of travel to obviously what we want to be embarking upon.
Well, and I think one of the things in a previous discussion, you know, when you look at the pools and saving money, and well, let's just not heat it. Let's just, you know, maybe two or 3 degrees colder. Not realizing that now some of the people who need to do that the most, because that's the only exercise, they're not going to go because it's too cold, or it doesn't even provide the health benefit. Or, you know, you change the hours, and maybe there's groups that don't want to be there if anyone else is there. But now you've excluded their time, and it's like I said, it's the secondary and tertiary you can't even fathom until you dig into the.
You're completely right. What we know and what we see is that, as you say, if you put a pressure on pools to operate more and more sort of commercially, and of course they should to a degree operate commercially, make sensible decisions, but if you put more and more pressure on, you need to try and cut costs, try and make money, try and make a profit, then all the sort of the additional social value, social good elements that they want to do and would like to do, such as you mentioned sessions for perhaps Muslim women who require certain conditions to be able to want to go and exercise in those pools. Well, if they're not commercially viable, they're going to be potentially the ones that go, and you're going to chuck on more learn to swim sessions for generalising rich white kids who are already going and can afford to pay, because that's what pays the bills. And that's, and operators don't want to be doing that. Operators are really keen and are doing really good stuff around making sure they're trying to maximise the social value in their pools. But it's that pressure when you get to this point of energy costs have gone up so much, operating costs have gone up so much, they're forced into making these difficult decisions. The pool temperature, it wouldn't surprise you. Our mailbag got a few people writing in to say that their pool's now a lot colder and they didn't like it so much. And I get that. If you're going into swim up and down fast, it doesn't really matter. But if you're going with your kids, you're standing there for the side log, so you see your kids shivering. It's not as enticing a proposition, perhaps. But that was done as a reaction and a need to show that they're doing the steps they can to save money where they can. But obviously, the savings made by dropping your pool temperature a couple of degrees pale into insignificance when offset against the rising costs. So they absolutely had to do it to try and make the savings where they could, but it wasn't going to ever out to solving the problem.
No, absolutely. So let's go to Tom. We'll start with you because we're gonna keep bouncing back between the social, the environmental, and then the business. So you made a business choice to move into deep green. I'm assuming that it had to be a good business choice because you're in business. What were some of the other, as you went through the process of analyzing, is this going to work for me? What are some things that you discovered? What are some of the things, both pleasant and not, and then pleasantly surprised? And then how did it work for you?
Sure. Well, it's a good question. The business choice was probably secondary to the social and ethical choice, to be honest. It's worth saying that we already co-locate off-site. We'd started doing that, so we already had done a lot of the hard work to move infrastructure out of Soho. In fact, some of it is just, I can see it out the window. So we'd already begun, but we wanted to take responsibility as a business. This is a key thing we're now focused on. We'd already begun measuring power consumption on individual workstations and devices, which not many people are doing yet in creative industries. So we're getting the stats. We're building sustainability into our decision making. It's at the core part of how we're deciding things, and we're trying to look through a green lens, all the time. In color grading, you can't always look through a green lens, literally, but I'm sure you know what I mean. So I'm a geek, a massive geek. It's my company, but I'm kind of the CTO as well, and I have to make some quite demanding stuff work. But there's 14 of us. It's not a big company, right? There's people here that are managing huge infrastructure workloads, and I get that that's a bigger task. But for us, we could move quickly. I just thought, let's go for it. We went for it. We haven't finished. We've begun. So we've got some offsite non-real-time rendering, which is really cool, but we're looking forward to having a site closer, which will then bring real-time workstations with interactive sessions. It was kind of more of a ethical and sustainability choice, and actually it just works anyway for financially as well, so it's a no-brainer.
Well, and you say you're not that big, but having worked in the with customers doing rendering, it's actually a huge, for example, how long, that one that we just saw, what are the stats on how long and how much capacity that took?
So
production?
It's worth saying that we're not doing a lot of visual effects, right? So the real power-hungry compute here is 3D CGI visual effects, and there's other companies which I'm sure we're going to be talking to in due course who've got really big GPU-hungry workloads, and those sorts of customers want hundreds of hours of NVIDIA time to sometimes make a single frame, of a 3D hair-clad, monster of some sort or something. So this stuff is hungry. For us, it's more manageable. We're looking to virtualizing workstations now. That's a challenge for us. So people are used to having like a dedicated workstation that just works and plays back 4K cinema quality when it needs to. We need to densify, if that's a word, these workstations into these workloads, and that's what we're going to be working with Deep Green to do. But that's the way we're going to move, and I confidently feel we can generate some good heat, for these pools.
How have you had to change? How have you had to change? Why, I can't put that together. You know what I'm about to say, though, right? How have you had to change how you operated or connected with your infrastructure based on being on Deep Green, or not at all? It's just.
I guess it's a sort of two-sided coin, because we're also moving into virtualization and working on tools to spin up on demand. And this is actually kind of a lot of what you're into, I know, at CIVO. So that's a journey in itself, right? And it just helps that we're running it on this great infrastructure. But that's a challenge we're working through. But it's solvable. People in this room looking after corporate clients in banking and all this sort of stuff. This has been going on for years, right? But less powerful workstations. So that's the challenge for us, is making this stuff really perform, because filmmakers are quite demanding. They like to exert stress sometimes on me and my team. So it has to perform. The kit has to work exceptionally well, and that's where we're striving for. And it's great to be in company of people that are passionate about that too.
Well, it's great that you looked at him, because actually you get the question next. So traditionally, maybe typically, see cloud workloads when we think of the hyperscalers. They're massive, highly dense, and you're going to even more of a virtualized data center environment. What does that mean for your cloud, and how have you engineered your network, your connectivity, and then the cloud itself in a Deep Green environment?
Yeah, like I said, I've always been early stage in my tech career, been a proponent for sustainable technology, and I think with CIVO we've built it in from the start. That's been part of our DNA. There's obviously business benefits, but it's quite close to my heart in terms of, as I mentioned, kids and things like that, and next generations. I think we have a responsibility to do this stuff. I think I was just talking before the session, actually. We're in this world now where we have this abundance, almost this cloud, this kind of unlimited amount of capacity, and whether we're taking photos on our phone, whether we're music or whatever it might be, storing emails, we never delete anything. We take 10 photos of the same thing, and that never gets deleted. And most of this stuff, 10 years later, we're not accessing it. It's being stored somewhere. It's possibly being replicated. It's possibly being backed up as well. And we're obviously that's using it's still turned on though. We still might access it at any point. So that's wasting energy. So I think there's a responsibility for the technology sector as well to look how we can improve things and lower usage. Even when we move data around, there's a cost to that. So at CIVO, we're really a big proponent for modern technologies. You mentioned virtualization, but it's also moving into what's called containers now, which is even more optimized. There's new technology like WebAssembly as well, which is even more optimized, where essentially, rather than, I don't want to get too technical, but a lot of the things or the applications that we run on the internet are in source code that don't get compiled. With WebAssembly, we can compile that down to a smaller file, and we can actually run a lot more workloads on the same amount of resources. So I think there's things like that big tech, CIVO as well, that we've got to really encourage people to use. Even programming languages, there's more modern programming languages, things like Rust and Go, that are way more efficient to write code in than some older languages. So companies have to think about how they build code. So it's way broader than just the data center. And obviously there's a lot of profit, especially from the hyperscalers, of selling you things you don't need and leaving them turned on. And they're not going to tell you to turn them off. So again, it raises questions about, companies are in business to make money, but there's a balance there about ethics. And I think from what I'm seeing as well with the new generations I mentioned, they're wising up to these kind of tactics sometimes that are being used to entice us into things, and they're way more socially aware. So, but yeah, CIVOs, we want to do more. We are doing more. We are looking at the modern technologies. We've also set up a CIVO Foundation as well, which is actually giving back in many different ways. We're helping disadvantaged people with learning technology. We're investing in sustainable causes externally from ours. And personally, I've invested in a number of different startups that are actually, sustainable companies and solar panel companies and people like that. So it's part of our DNA. Whereas I guess with big tech, I sometimes think, is it a reaction to, oh, it's not looking good, we need to be doing this? And I think people need to think differently and think about these future generations.
So Mark, so we've talked to two customers, two power-hungry, compute-hungry customers, and a distributed, virtualized critical infrastructure works. All right, does it work for everybody? Who does it work best for? Both operationally as well as economically. And then who, maybe not so much, from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, both, as you say, both Mark and Tom, you're running high performance compute. So those workloads are friends, and certainly, I guess I haven't seen the math, but I suppose as a proportion of that massive explosion in compute, the vast majority of it is AI workloads and machine learning workloads and rendering. So those are our heartland. Mark mentioned the change in the software layers, and those changes in the software layers will make this whole concept much easier to do. And by that I mean, in 5 to 10 years' time, the technologies that Mark's talked about there's this notion of zero trust. So your banking app can actually run anywhere, and no one can hack it. It's just the way that the software is written, it is unhackable, and that in itself then feeds back into heat sinks, because then you can get even more creative and dream even bigger about where you can sink heat. And on top of that, all of the infrastructures run much more efficiently. So some data centers, the actual amount that they're on is really, really low, right? It's sort of, the computers are actually only really sort of chugging away, sort of quite small percentages. And we obviously love the workloads that are on a lot. But that's changing as assets become, as the software layers change, then the world improves on the heat sink side, I guess. So pools are really just the start. They're the physical manifestation. They're so important because we can all get it. Laptop gets hot, put the heat into a pool. But then hopefully, as we said, other aspects of society change because of this free heat substrate. Carbon is an externality that we don't price at the moment. We're very bad at pricing, and we think of heat as an asset that's got a price. But that's going to imagine a world when that changes, when carbon is expensive and heat's free. And that then feeds back into the pool and conversation.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. I remember when the German government passed, I think it was a year ago, where every data center had to have a portion or had to prove heat reuse or have a really good reason why you weren't. And I think I was on it was in a show in France, a big conference, and everybody's like, that makes no sense. We can't pump heat that far away. And it's like, you're missing the point. Don't go far away. You should be close enough, for that to work. Okay, so we're gonna transition from the operational to more of the environmental and the social, and how it works with the commercial. So both of them said, no, actually it was green first for me, and everything else was going to work out. How have you seen that playing out? Is that true? What portion of companies are truly looking at it versus looking at simply being able to say they're looking at it?
Oh, I think it's a question of scale. It tends to be the smaller, more purpose-driven businesses that would lead with something that just feels good. You know, it just feels right. We love this solution. We're excited about it. And as long as the commercials are kind of broadly the same, we'll go with it. You know, the larger organizations, you've got a much bigger political problem, and you tend to have those longer-term relationships and, you know, big procurement teams and issues around that. But you know, I think for me, the future of sustainability is not the sustainability policy. It is about purpose. And I, you know, as I started out by saying, the idea that, and I'm sure organizations, you know, like Tom's talked about and also Mark, the idea that companies that are the most sustainable tend to be the ones that don't even have a sustainability policy. You know, it's just what we do. And actually, we don't lead with the profit question. We lead with, does this feel right? Does this align with our vision for the future? Does it align with our purpose? And do the commercials work? That's a much easier conversation to have with a small private owner-operated business than it is to have with a big multinational publicly listed organization, even though they're the ones that do the big corporate reporting. So I think you've got different conversations that you're having with different scales of organizations. With the larger multinationals, publicly listed companies, it's 100% about reducing your carbon emissions and leading with the social good, because that stuff just makes the head of sustainability go, oh my God, wow. You know, because people are really scratching around. They really are scratching around in the dirt to find good sustainability supply chain stories. It's really, really hard. You know, and we work with big organizations that have got thousands of suppliers. And we all know, you know, the scope 3 emissions for most organizations are 98, 99% of your carbon impact. It's not about, you know, the light bulbs in your offices. It's about all the stuff that you're buying. And for local authorities, they're really struggling. So many companies, so many local authorities have made carbon declarations, you know, climate declarations, net zero commitments, and they are really, really struggling, because the first place you go is, right, well, let's buy green energy. Well, that's a cost. Let's get in some really expensive sustainability consultants to tell us how we can decarbonize. And usually that means changing equipment. It means upgrading buildings. There's a lot of cost associated with that. So, you know, a lot of people are panicking about how on earth, now we've made these declarations, how on earth are we going to actually achieve it? So there's that. And I think this is just such a beautiful example. I'm all for industrial symbiosis. You know, it's something I bang on about. It's a great Scrabble score, you know, and we in sustainability love a bit of a glossary and all these lovely technical terms. But, you know, there's no such thing as waste in nature. The output from one process becomes the input to another. And I think we've just naturally divorced ourselves in industry from that. We create so much waste, and it's just madness that we're venting heat to the atmosphere when actually that is something that we desperately need in our homes, in our workplaces. You know, we need this energy, and to be able to use it in that way is just beautifully simple and elegant solution.
Do you want to say something? By the way, everybody can just jump in.
It is odd that it's odd. It is odd that it's odd. Because it shouldn't be, should it? I mean, if you're a blast furnace and you're trying to recapture the heat, yeah, that's a structural issue. But computers, as we're sort of fond of saying, you almost couldn't create a better electric heater than a computer. And so I think where we're anchored is that if you look at a wind turbine or a solar panel, then you can actually look at a computer in the same, you can frame it in the same way. You can say, actually, it is one of the most important sustainable assets we've got. We just need them in a different place. And it's true to say, 8 years ago when we set up Heater, the reaction to rendering your movie on a hot water tank was visceral, and it wasn't a good visceral. But the change, and that's what I've charted and what we've charted over the last sort of 3 or 4 years, is this change that it's no longer that odd. Do you know what I mean? It's the world is changing really fast, and as we grow and as our estate grows, and as I said in the slides, it's kind of hard for us humans to frame a future because all of us we're really good at just anchoring ourselves into today and not getting eaten by lions. But actually, there is a path towards this now, and that for me is incredibly exciting. You know what I mean? It's just like all the swimming pools of the UK heated by computers for free. I mean, it's just fucking nuts.
It just makes sense. Go ahead.
I was going to say as well that, there's I'm very much a proponent of systems thinking, and, this makes complete sense to me. In my own home, the study is the warmest room in the house. That's where you go when you're really cold and you don't want to put on the heating because the computers are pumping it all out. So, I get very excited about the idea of homes being heated with the computers that they've got inside. It's wonderful. But what I was going to say is, we need to think also about the political framework here. I find this a very interesting, scalable solution because we've got a real problem in the UK. We've got a massive problem with an archaic planning system. We've got a real problem with infrastructure and quite a fragile undercapacity grid. And the fact that it takes, over a decade to get grid upgrade programs to actually go from planning to fruition. This is a real problem when you're talking about the capacity that we need over time. And actually, the UK has been downgraded. We were number 4 globally in the index of attractive places for green investment. Last year, we were downgraded from 4th place to 7th place because actually the political system and the infrastructure that we have, the UK has become quite complacent in our early adoption of offshore wind. We've seen ourselves as being a real leader. Actually, last year, the Contracts for Difference, which is this very geeky, you quickly get into very geeky stuff with power, as I'm sure the Octopus people know, the auction failed. The government couldn't get a single new wind farm contract off the ground because it wasn't properly financed, the conditions weren't correct, and actually money is going elsewhere. And so there's a real problem here about how are we going to transition to a green energy future if we can't get these big infrastructure projects properly off the ground? And anybody involved in any kind of property work knows the problems with utilities connections, the problems with planning. This is a real problem for everybody to move the economy forwards. What I love about this is that you're actually you're reducing the demand on the grid because you're taking computing power and the need for heat and you're smushing them together instead of having 1 + 1 equaling 2, doubling the capacity of the grid. It's such an elegant solution. And I really want to see that systems thinking coming into so many other ways that we're applying planning and infrastructure projects.
So, I mean, you said it. And by the way, I blame Milton Friedman, who said that corporate social responsibility, that making money was the company's responsibility to society, which no, not anymore. You brought it up that, previously it's will be sustainable so long as it's profitable. We've got 2 examples, 3 of are things changing to it will be profitable so long as it's sustainable. And you talked about social ROI on the call. And I kind of hate that we always have to bring it back around to a dollar equivalent, but I also think realistically that's the conversation we have to have. So how do you do that, and then how do we apply it in industry?
Yeah, we found it helpful to do largely to help make the case for investment into facilities and swimming more broadly to government where pounds and pence signs do still hold sway. We've done a couple of value of swimming reports which looks at precisely that, the social value of swimming, which is how we got the 2.4 billion figure that Mark quoted, which is an underestimation, by the way. It would be much higher. It doesn't take into factor a whole range of health conditions, doesn't look at children, it looks at adults. There's, that figure undersells the true value of swimming to society quite substantially. So yeah, we went out and just decided we wanted that robust, that credible sort of evidence base to inform our influencing and advocacy campaigns on behalf of swimming. And so that's why we took the leap originally in 2019, and then again in 2023 to refresh it and bring it up to date with latest developments. But yeah, as you say, keep making that case on the sort of human interest side that everyone gets, everyone intuitively understands that swimming's good for you, and then but actually trying to put some sort of metrics and credibility with government around that.
Yeah. So how do we expand that? How do we bring in the biodiversity, the habitat loss, water into helping companies like Deep Green?
So there is a direction of travel at the moment. We can see it in all of our regulation. We can see it in just last week, the EU directive on corporate sustainability reporting has gone through. We've got recently the climate-related financial disclosures regulations in the UK, all sorts of movement from lots of directions, which is about disclosure on not just climate-related impacts, but now sustainability impact in the round. And we've got this geeky term in sustainability that we call double materiality. So what that means is not only what is your impact on the environment and society, but what is the impact of a changing environment and society on your business. And so we're thinking much more holistically about, what is your place in the world as an organization? What value do you bring? And then what do societal and environmental changes, what impact are they going to have on your business model? And, there's just a lot more movement in regulation around disclosure. And the purpose of that is because ultimately that's going to be linked to financial penalty or financial benefit. So there's a big movement globally on carbon pricing. And we're starting to see in the UK carbon border adjustment mechanisms. So essentially what that means is more carbon intensive products and services are priced higher, they're taxed. And we're going to start seeing organizations being directly financially impacted by their carbon emissions. And that is just the conveyor belt that we're on, and it's happening. So I think, I'm going to wrap up here because I could talk about this all day. But yeah, it. Yeah. So, I think this is the savvy organization, no matter who you are, is recognizing that the writing is on the wall. I've been saying this as a sustainability professional for 25 years now, but now it's actually bloody true. Do you know what I mean? Like I've been saying for years, it's coming. Now we can touch it. It's right there. These directives are here. The UK government has said that in July this year, the sustainability reporting standards are going to be published. So, and that will mean from next year that major corporates, and then every year after that, smaller and smaller organizations will be brought in, are going to have to report, disclose sustainability indicators. That's going to be mandatory with your annual reporting, and then linked to that is going to be forms of penalty if you're not performing. So I think, it's all part of the direction.
Okay, so we're about to open the panel for questions. I've got one more, but I do want to underline from my perspective what she just said. If you think about the greenwashing law that the EU just passed and the effects of stripping away offsets from sustainability claims, just think about that. Everybody who has an offset, it's gone. Just, it's going to be a huge effect, which means you have to truly start looking at looking at truly sustainable solutions. You can't just buy your way out of it. All right, the last question for you two. What have you done with this, and what is the reaction from the market or from your customers that you're choosing a greener solution? I mean, I'm hoping it's been a good reaction.
So yeah, everyone I speak to in my little sphere of engineering and post-production work, which is a big employer in the UK. There's 19,000 people working in post-production and visual effects. The creative industries, help bring a lot of money in to the UK. So it's a big thing, and it all kind of happens in secret in these kind of invisible data centers and machine rooms in Soho that sometimes render too much and the power cuts out and everyone has to go to the pub, which is kind of nice. But then you sort of think about that, well, hang on a minute, as we're here in the pub and everything stopped, why is that? This demand is very high. So people want to make a difference that I've spoken to. The film industry, the TV industry, they're both very wasteful. We know that. We can see it. We can see film productions come in, build sets, destroy them, throw them out. There's a lot of focus on things that are physical, but there now needs to be a focus on things that are digital and a bit less obvious. So it's really exciting to be part of that, and everyone that I know, I talk to about it, want to get involved. So there's a hunger for positive change, and I think that's a good thing, right?
I guess from my point of view, probably not as many people as I'd like care about this in our customers, and maybe it's because we're in an economic climate where cost, is a driver. People are looking to reduce cost, so a lot of people are coming to us purely to save money, not because of the green credentials and things that we're supporting. So it's not that common actually. Cost is the big thing right now, which I think is a shame. With that said, the stuff that we've done with Deep Green, we were already providing GPUs in traditional data centers, and we've now launched them in partnership with Deep Green, and we've done them at the same cost. Because we're saying, well, because some companies are quite often trying to put a premium on green stuff. So we're trying to shift that mentality, say, well, but we have a green option for you at the same cost, so that doesn't become a factor. So, I'd like to see a change. I think it's education. I think there's a lot as well that goes on, even away from the supply chains and things that you mentioned about that big tech can do, the way we build code, efficiencies and things like that would never come into this reporting really. But what's being done to write more efficient code that could execute a tenth of the energy cost when it executes. Things like that. The trying to turn things off that we don't need, not having 10 copies of our data when we only might need 1 or 2. Encouraging users to delete things. So there's a lot more we can do as well, in that respect.
I'll just.
Loren, just to say, you are 1 inch from falling off that stage.
I thought that was part of the show.
Please don't do that. Okay, questions? Anyone? Here's a question. Oh, okay, lots of questions. Going to start at the back.
Hi, thank you for the panel. It was really, really interesting. I think the proof of concept is here. The question I have is, can you walk me through the unit economics from an investor's perspective in the actual asset itself? And also, what is your limiting factor to reaching scale moving forward? Obviously, you mentioned sort of 1,500 sites. Is your limiting factor your clients, demand on the computing side? Is it the power? Is there anything else?
To take the second bit of the question first, it is, if you frame the challenge of the data center industry, which needs this exponential increase in compute, and then you look at it from the other end of the telescope and you say, where could you put compute where heat is needed? It is almost unlimited. So Matt, our amazing CTO, did a fag packet calculation probably more than a couple of years ago, and we figured that there was probably something like a 3.4 trillion retrofit opportunity, challenge, however you frame it, across Europe. So you can put a data center pretty much anywhere where heat is needed. Now, there are caveats to that. If you need high heat, then you probably aren't going to put a data center with it. But if you need heat at a reasonable temperature, the future will be where you put a deep green unit with a heat pump, because every 10 degrees you increase the input water to a heat pump, you make the heat pump 2 times more efficient. So in terms of capacity, unlimited. The constraint to growth is awareness and now just time. And I guess how we're framing it is that we are in a climate emergency, right? Last time there was this much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the sea levels were 15 meters higher than they are now, and there were palm trees growing in the Antarctic. And the climate science is pretty solid on this. That world is coming. It may take many hundreds of years, but there is an urgency now, and we talked about the urgency within corporates to do it. And as Mark said, there's no cost implication. In fact, as we progress, it will just get cheaper and cheaper to do this. So you've got to be careful you don't get ahead of your skis sometimes in business. You've got to make sure that the world follows you. But in terms of overall kind of capacity, this is kind of the future. But then you'd expect me to say that.
Thanks. Yeah. So, have you got salespeople yet?
They're all
okay.
They're all in yellow. You can look at them.
So what are they selling? What's the product? Is it co-location where I bring my own kit and put it into your baths as such, or am I just buying compute from you? Is it a kilowatt? You know, what is this product?
Yeah.
And then how do you then allied to that? How do I get my data in and out? So how does that work? And you know, data centers have things like security, fire suppression, things like that as well. So I'm just interested in a bit more detail.
The product.
But this all sounds great, but I'd love to know the detail if we can. Thanks.
Again, to take the second bit first, it's odd how few people now say security. I mean, 8 years ago, that was like, you're going to build a data center where? But actually, the reality is 60% of all data centers are on-prem. They're in all of those offices and businesses out there. And it's Norman in accounts who's got the keys. And there's no resiliency, no redundancy. So actually, again, as the world changes, 15 years ago, some of you in the room will remember the journey to the cloud. And everyone was fretting about security. Is it security? Now no one thinks that. We just accept it as a reality. So I think it's still a concern, and it's still something that we address. So we build to we're building to tier 3 standards. We're building, there's double resiliency that goes in. You know, the networks are backhauled to 2 different data centers, and the data centers are meshed themselves. So there's definitely that consideration, but I think it's lessening. And then you've got a pressure of carbon. So if you're faced with what is on the face of it like for like, then theoretically the carbon kind of advantage changes. I think the cooling thing is a really interesting. We can get very geeky on that, but very, very quickly, certainly 2 years ago, we were really anchored in immersion. These crazy idea that you put computers in oil. And that's great, and we love those workloads because they're super, super easy to get the heat out of. But we can also do the other ones, and we've practiced now on the other ones, and now we're taking those workloads as well. They're not quite as efficient. You don't capture quite as much of the heat, but we recognize that the world will take time to change and densify, and these things will change, yeah. So co-location and bare metal, yeah. So you take space in our data center just like you do in any other normal colo, yeah. Standard rack space if you're air cooled, and then space in tanks if you want to immerse or if you can immerse. So yeah, in that way we've somewhat done ourselves a disservice in as much as we've framed it in the social good, so it looks really esoteric. We are just a normal regional data center at the end of it. Yeah.
I like your vision of trying to hit 1,500 swimming pools in 5 years' time. How do you cut through the multiple layers of bureaucracy of local authority to convince them to data centers, leisure center buildings?
The beauty about reciprocity is that it changes everyone's brain chemistry and things happen really, really fast. So when you give the heat away for free, you're welcomed in. So we have, I think I'm right in saying we can touch about 900 pools directly now, and more pools are coming in all the time. So it's actually a really easy conversation because it is this symbiosis. We'll take a bit of space, you get the free heat. So actually we're not really encountering those barriers that you would ordinarily find when you try and charge for something. And actually the data center industry has kind of got in its own way to some degree, probably slightly accidentally on purpose, because it's easier to say, oh, well, no one will buy my heat, so I couldn't do it. But the reality is, if you're spending £1 powering the computers and then 50p cooling them down, if you don't have that 50p, we're just richer. It's just a better thing economically to do. So it doesn't, do you know what I mean? Like it doesn't, yeah, the economics work for us as well.
Thanks. Paul Rose from Atlas Edge. I'm touching upon a comment made earlier on. I'll repeat a comment I made to a Tech UK sustainability panel last summer. If you start out with the vision that you are using 100% renewable energy, and you take the proposition of taking all of the waste heat and now making it useful, how exactly would you be able to put that into an ESG report?
Love it. Geeky carbon question. So there is this fledgling kind of concept that we're grappling with at the moment, because this is all kind of leading edge stuff, and carbon reporting really is in its infancy. You know, people like me have been trying to grapple with it for 20 years, but it really is in its infancy. And there's so many problems like this. But there is this concept that we're grappling with called Scope 4, which is something called avoided emissions. Now, you've got to be so careful with that, because you can imagine how people can just run away with greenwash when it comes to avoided emissions, because it's really a theoretical concept that if we do this, then we prevent that thing from happening. Well, you know, you're getting into the kind of territory of carbon credits where I promise I won't cut down this tree if you give me some money. You know, it's like, well, were you really going to cut down the tree in the first place? I don't know. It's a very, very difficult, thorny area, and it needs a lot of debate. It needs a lot of intellectual, you know, mulling over. But it is there. And it is something that with a business model like this, avoided emissions is a real thing. It's quantifiable. It's right there. You've got the energy bills of the swimming pool before the data center started operating, and then the day it's switched on, you've got the cut. It's right there. So I think this is a very good case study of where we can start to use Scope 4 reporting in a meaningful way. We've also got, you know, the GHG protocol. The Greenhouse Gas Protocol is the mechanism we use. It's the international language of carbon accounting. It hasn't been updated for, I think it was written in like the 1990s. It's not been updated for a very long time. It's full of holes. And as we're working with carbon reporting, you know, I'm a big fan, as I say, of systems change, of lobbying, of trying to change the standards and the way that systems work for the benefit of everyone, not just navel gazing on your own corporate, you know, household. And I think it's really important that as we do these things, we get involved with these big international organizations and say, this standard is no longer fit for purpose. It needs changing in this way. We need to update reporting. And actually not be afraid to break the mold, you know, do the traditional reporting and then add a load into it that's right there, right in your face going, hey, the current global reporting standards don't allow us to tell you about this thing, but this is the most important thing that we can talk about. So, you know, just
it is actually an opportunity to, we were talking about this only yesterday, there is an opportunity to just frame a new set of better metrics and then just say to the market, that's what we think we're doing pretty well, so that's what we're measuring, and then let everyone else have a 0 or a blank in their column.
You know, I'm gonna take off I'm gonna be a panelist. You know, I think the other thing that we have to do, and you see this as there's a lot of discussion right now within the CSRD on is Scope 3 and the current methodologies fit for purpose, and that's going to apply to 1 and 2. And she talked about Scope 4, which I thoroughly hate, because everything you hear from a Scope 4 perspective is not. But
I've dropped the F-bomb, you can say it.
Oh, is this a free fire zone?
Yeah.
But I think when you have to look at it quantifiably and we start looking at things more holistically, if you are able to drop someone else's Scope 1 or 2 or 3 demonstrably, you may not necessarily get direct credit for that now, but I think we will, because we're starting to see it's not just about did this company do okay. If they wrecked everything else, then you know it doesn't matter, and the converse should be true as we go along.
Hi everyone. So I'm really excited about this. Very excited, and I'm happy my wife is still here, because I don't know how I'll explain that to her, how I'm excited about this. So basically, I work in IT. I work for an organization that manufactures a vendor for data storage. So I see the benefits, and I see my customers are on a regular basis talking about how much it costs them to cool their data centers and such. So I get it from that point of view. But where I'm really excited about this is I'm the producer of the film documentaries Blacks Can't Swim, and co-founder of the Black Swimming Association, Hi Film. And so therefore, and also I'm someone who's only just recently learned how to swim. Some may or may not know that swimming is a big issue within the African, Caribbean, and Asian communities. 95% of Black adults in England do not swim. 80% of Black children in England do not swim. And it's figures are not that far behind with Asians as well. And obviously we have the highest drowning rate. a lot of people, there's a lot of factors why we are, behind these statistics. But one of them is accountability in the pool. When we're doing research, when we're speaking to people, they'll say, oh, when I go to Jamaica, when I go to Ghana, I go into the water because it's nice and warm. Here it's cold, it's this, it's that. So hearing about what is happening here is mind-blowing. My question is, why has no one done this before?
Thanks, Ed.
I think Mark up there and I have this exchange probably every 24 hours now, which is competition's coming, everyone's going to be doing this. And my standard reply is always, it's a 3.4 trillion problem. Octopus are amazing backers, but I think we would struggle to raise 3.4 trillion in the next 10 years. So the answer is it's coming. And the answer is that there are a lot of other businesses in Europe who are starting to do it and have actually been doing it for longer than us. There's a brilliant business called Cloud and Heat in Germany and another business called, I forget, Carnot in France. So it's coming, but I think it's a brain chemistry issue. We are humans and we habit and the norm is always available to us. It's so until we have events like this and brilliant brands like Octopus Energy invest and say no, this is the way forward, that legitimizes it, and then people's brain chemistries can change, and then the pioneers in the room, the bell curve of adoption starts to take over. So more and more people do it.
Hello? Oh no, turned off. I think as well, the changing environment, and I mean like legislative, social environment. So energy historically has been cheap. I mean, I remember when I was at school, one of our physics lessons, the teacher took us through the economics of how your dad was wrong when he told you to switch off the light. We would work out, how much it would cost you to leave all the lights in the house burning for 24 hours. And it was like 2 pence. So they were going, now you can go back and tell your dad it doesn't matter if you leave the lights on all the time. That was education. The landscape has completely changed now, and it's not just the energy costs are rising, it's the availability of materials, it's the planning issues that we're facing, there's just so many more constraints. And I liken it as well to this concept of circularity. It's always been this highfalutin concept that sustainability people have talked about, we should make things more circular. And it's been like, yeah, that's nice, but we've got stuff to do over here. The grown-ups are talking, so you just go over there and do your little project. What's changing right now, and I work a lot in the construction sector, we've got wars. We've got massive problems with supply chains. We've got enormous problems with energy prices and the costs of materials. And actually now availability of raw materials, virgin materials from source, is a massive problem. Projects are getting delayed, costs are increasing between putting in your planning application and receiving planning. Suddenly the cost of your project has doubled. Suppliers are going bust. So actually looking at a building that's sitting right on your doorstep and is full of materials and thinking about how we can reuse that has suddenly become obvious. Now we're looking at it going, well, why wouldn't I use the urban bank of materials that's sitting right here and is a known quantity instead of putting in an order with somebody halfway across the world who might go bust and the shipping might break down. So there is a changing landscape here, and I think everything reaches a tipping point. I love that term. It reaches a tipping point beyond which you then go, right, the conditions now exist, and it is obvious that this is the way forward. And I think that's where we are with this.
I am Keith from, I think
we have.
Hewlett Packard Enterprise. So we're pretty good at creating very hot supercomputers all around the world. One of the things I want to ask you is, because I know we are actually looking at it. Up there, okay. How do you get around the warranty issues?
Luckily, when we took apart our A100 cards 2 years ago, there was no warranty. It was a bit of a. I remember sending the cards off to be immersion prepared, and thinking, I really hope this doesn't go wrong, because we were paying the bill. But now, thankfully, more and more suppliers are warranting, and we are getting to the stage. In fact, we've got to the stage where the kit just comes on a sled and is fully warranted. So that is hugely helpful. I mean, yeah, to take the risk on this, you can't take a 3.4 trillion risk, and now you no longer do. And again, that adoption, that is speeding up to the point where, really geeking out for 1 second, but the SXM systems, the H100 SXM systems, which NVIDIA, every time you are told NVIDIA, there's no chance it'll ever be immersed, it's all these wires are really, really important. They're immersing them now. Yeah.
I'm interested in the traditional metrics of computer data centers. The holy grail in the past has been the PUE. You've got to get it down from 1.6 in the old days, down to 1.2 or whatever. Basically, that's a metric of how efficient you can throw away your biggest asset. You know, you open the window and you let it all go out. And the focus has been there. The elephant in the room is the total cost of running data centers on the power. So I'm interested in what your metrics are for overall. So if you get a megawatt in, how much actually gets passed on to the next customer in the line? Because the cost then becomes the difference. And then if we start measuring data centers and the efficiency, it might be 2 to 1. Let's say megawatt in, 500 kilowatts gets sold or given to the next person in the line.
Yes.
Data centers then move from being a computing industry to being energy transfer business with a sideline in computing, because they use computers to do the energy change and generate the heat. So I'm just interested in your overall metric. Are you in the 2 to 1, 3 to 1, 5 to 1? How good are you compared with the old guys?
I feel like I'm monopolizing the questions, but I guess naturally, your point is absolutely spot on, and that idea of heat pump efficiency that's one of those metrics we were talking about earlier, which I think we, as a pioneer and perceived to be, rightly or wrongly, as leaders, need to actually adopt. And so we need to say, as you say, if we reused 97% of the electrons, that should be the measure of how good we are. So yeah, that is front and center of our reporting and our kind of thinking about carbon, particularly. Yes, efficiency rather than just this really blunt metric. So 100%. And yeah, as I said, it's a live and present conversation, definitely. So watch this space. We're just very conscious that we want to make sure that when we do publish and when we do put a firework up about that, it is the best, most awesome firework ever, and everyone goes, wow, okay, right, that's the way to go. Yeah, we're not quite there yet.
You know, I just wanted to tack on, because I think you're right. And if you look at the PUE as a metric overall, we're looking at a data center as an island. Everything stays within it. And there was a data center, and I'm not going to call them out, but they tried to pull the same thing, and they were like, similar, I should say. Hey, all of our heat goes into the ocean, and we pump it down low where it's really cold, and we bring the cold water back. Our PUE is 1.0, and it's like, yeah, you skipped the middleman on carbon and went straight to cooking the fish. No. But in this case, if you look at the power required to heat the swimming pools, they're going to have to be heated anyway. So maybe we need to change our thinking, because if someone else, the industrial symbiosis, takes it over, there is no power to, PUE doesn't matter anymore. It's all there because the point, everything after the point went to the pool.
Excellent. Okay, well, in the interest of time, and I thank you very much for spending yours with us, just some closing thoughts. I think we're beginning to answer this question. Hopefully, I'm sure there's more questions, and we've got sort of half an hour together. Feel free to grab anyone in a green T-shirt. Thank God I'm not wearing one. Knows the answer to all your questions. I'm just in marketing. If you want to get deeply into sort of what NetPew might look like, then Matt is a big fan of talking about how to measure the future. So just hit anyone with a green T-shirt. If you'd like to buy some compute, then just, again, hit anyone in a lifeguard outfit. We're here to sell. But it does start with you, whether it is your advocacy of what we're doing, your interest, posting about why people sort of do fancy dress at data center sort of breakfasts on LinkedIn, whatever you can contribute, do contribute. If you have to focus anywhere, then please focus in the work of Swim England. We care a lot about data centers, and certainly the client's work that's on them. But we care as much and probably more about the impact that this can have in terms of society. I don't know where Ed has gone, but we are definitely going to be talking about how we can contribute things like swim hours that is beyond the currency within the data center, but more to contribute back to society. And I advocate our clients who are making ethical decisions about what they do commercially, so I thank them for that. But yeah, do look at the work that Phil and his team, it's not just Swim England, but it's also the other swim organizations across the United Kingdom, and we'll be planting data centers somewhere near you shortly. Let's do this one pool at a time. 200 kilowatts, that's a small number, will heat a pool with £80,000 worth of contributed heat energy. So this is all within, your goodwill to do if you're in the compute business. And let's do it now, right? There's an emergency on. There's still an emergency on. But we're optimists. We take it seriously, but we're also here to have some fun. So we think that it's possible to do this. Join us for more we're going to have some more sort of like event-like things. This is like beyond good. Good is okay, but it's not great. So what is beyond good? And so we're doing beyond some stuff, beyond lectures. You're all welcome to join us. Beyond appearances, Georgia will probably join us for that, talking about what to report and what to report in the future beyond what we might know as greenwashing, but things which are truly practical and actionable. Beyond trees, we might look at the offset and removals market. We're a member of the Pond Foundation, so that's a conversation that we want to have. Beyond capitalism, I'm talking about conscious capitalism and new economic models. And Beyond Skynet is obviously about the optimistic future of AI, of which we're all going to be a part. The robots are coming. My thanks to all of you, obviously, for turning up. I respect that being sent a random email or seeing something on the internet or an invite from one of us and then showing up. Mark and I were taking bets on whether there would be 40 people here and enough croissants. So I hugely appreciate and respect your time. I obviously want to thank our panel. Can we give them a round of applause? And none of this happens without the diligent work of the people in green. So I'd like to thank my team for hours and hours and hours of work. It was only last night that we realized that because we'd built all of this in Google Slides, the videos were never going to play from the internet, particularly at the sort of resolution that the creative agency and Tom sends the files. It took me about 7 hours to get the fuckers onto my, get the buggers onto my machine. So I want to thank all of you because this is an incredible journey and you've been a really amazing part of it. Thanks, everybody. Hang out. There's probably one dried croissant and definitely some water. Rehydrate. Think about swimming.